Hi, this is Gary. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk through how you go about balancing a cash register, the procedures, and how you adjust them for different situations. Let's go ahead and get started on this here. Now, typically your register might look something like this or something in that proximity. What you want to do during the day before you go up to balance your registers, you want to make sure you're following the safe drop procedures, and they differ. Let's say you're working at a convenience store or a gas station. In this case, you might start out with like $100, and most of that is going to be small bills and coins. By small bills, I mean less than $10. You want to be able to make change. You're usually going to get a lot of 20s and possibly some larger bills, 50s or 100s. I know gas stations prefer not to have hundreds, but sometimes that happens. And when you're working at a gas station, they prefer to have a low amount of cash in the register, which means if you take $100 in transactions or $200 in transactions, it's a pretty good idea to do a safe drop or drop it in the vault, just to protect the cash on hand at the convenience store. Now, retail stores, on the other hand, are a little bit more lenient for how much cash. The retail store I managed, we'd start with the drawer of $200. About half of that was small bills and coins, or some combination. It might be 120, 80, or something like that. Just you want to have enough so you can make change. And then if you did a lot of business throughout the day, let's say, when I say business, I mean cash business, because you're gonna, at a retail store, you're gonna have cash, credit cards, and checks are gonna be your three components of business. There might be a fourth component of financing, which doesn't happen a lot. Now, that differs from the gas station in that mainly your sales are going to be cash and credit, and most gas stations don't take checks because they don't like having a lot of bad checks and stuff like that. So if you have a decent amount of cash, we'll say 1,000 is an arbitrary figure. It could be more than that, it could be less than that, depends on the store's policy. You want to make safe drops or deposits throughout the day to protect that in case something goes awry. Fortunately, in my experience, I probably had, between the jobs I've had, probably like 10 years or so, I was never in an unfortunate situation where we got robbed, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Now, moving on to the next part, or the most important part, is closing out your register. If you do everything right, this can be a pretty quick process. Could be 5 to 10 minutes, even less, depending on how everything goes. If you don't do anything right, or if you have problems, it can be a long, excruciating process that's not a lot of fun for everybody involved, and may involve a lot of digging. Let's go ahead and get started on this. First, and you can do this in any order, you want to add up your check totals, and the key question is, do they match the number on the computer system? If they don't, you might have forgot to count one. You could have transposed numbers when you're typing, or you could have typed them out correctly and somebody wrote a check and they transposed numbers. Those are the most common situations, but you want to add those up, make sure they're right, and then enter that on your deposit slip. The next step is you want to go ahead and add up the number of credit card slips you have. Usually they're Visa, Master, Discover. Some places take American Express, some places don't. It depends on how the merchants are with fees and stuff like that. And you want to make sure that the number of credit card slips you have matches the total you have on your computer screen, or whatever the computer batch says you're supposed to have. And if that's good, you move on. If it's not, you look through it and try to figure out why it's not doing that. Another component, which I don't have a picture of here, is void slips. You want to make sure that they match the computer total. Preferably, you'd like to have as little voids as possible. And they usually need like management approval or management initials to try to make sure you're not trying to steal or scam them, or that's how they would look at it from a loss prevention standpoint. And then another component you have here is cash. What you want to do is you want to leave your starting balance in the drawer. So if you start with 100, you leave 100 in the drawer. If you start with 200, you leave 200 in the drawer, and the access amount is the amount you're going to deposit in the bank. Now, obviously, the question once again is, do those totals match what's on the computer screen? If they do, that's a good thing. If they don't, you got to do some investigating. If it's only a few pennies off, usually just deposit it as is. But if it's a few dollars off or $1 off, then you got to start digging. And the next step is you want to go ahead and you add up all your refunds. Now, if you work at a convenience store, you won't have to do this step, and you probably won't have to do the check step, so it actually makes it quicker. And if you work at a bank, you're not going to have to do any refunds either. And you just want to make sure that those totals match those on the computer. And typically, at least in a retail store, you'll need a manager to sign off on all your stuff and go through it and make sure the numbers say they are what they are and everything's in order. One other thing to look out for with refunds, if you add up all your totals and you have a problem, let's say it's off a certain amount, I'll give an example here. One day I had a cashier, their drawer was off $200, and I went through all the transactions and I noticed there was a refund where the customer actually owed $100, and after doing a lot of digging, we figured out that the customer was given $100 and that they actually owed $100, and that made the drawer off $200. So we had to call the customer, and fortunately the customer came in and gave us the $200 back. So that's one thing to watch out for refunds, where you have money going out that's supposed to be coming in, or something to that effect. Then after you get your cash and your checks, you want to fill out the total on the bank slip, which I've listed on the top right hand corner here, and go ahead and make a deposit for that, or at least have a deposit slip. And then if you're in a retail store, manager will add up a bunch of drawers and put it all in one big deposit. And if you're in like a convenience store, they'll probably just do the one small deposit for the day. And then the next component I have here are, you have your credit card slips, your voids, your copies of the deposit slip, any refunds, and then of course your transaction batch printout, where they'll print out a copy of the transactions you had for the day. So if there's any questions, they can audit that. What you're going to do is you're going to fill all that stuff out. We call that paperwork, and then you're going to stick it in one of these the retail situation, you stick it in one of these boxes here, or they'll have a space to keep the paperwork, and then that'll get sent into usually the corporate office or whatever the headquarters is, and they'll have somebody look that over or keep track of that. And then of course one of the most important parts after you've completed all this stuff is you want to make sure that register drawer is locked up in the safe. You don't want to leave it out in the open with all that money in it. And that pretty much concludes our tutorial for closing out a register. Now, these are the general standards, or that was from my experience, and I worked for quite a few years. Now I know it differs based on industry and stuff like that, but it should be pretty close to what you're seeing on the screen here. Hopefully this was helpful.